Hi, everybody. This is Lisa Haven, and I've got lots of important information that I want to cover with you today. So I just want to jump right in. But here's the headline: A storm coming and all hell to break loose in 2015. If not, why are the elite preparing with FEMA camps? And I'm going to show evidence for this. Martial law as well. UN gun grab. That's your arms treaty. If you have not heard of that, that's going to be signed on Christmas Day. And climate chaos. And I've got a shocking statement from the French foreign minister of a massive warning on that. So just hang with me as we dive in. All right, so here's our first article I want to cover, and it's patriotnetdaily.com. And we're going to sit here for just a little bit. But the calm before the storm, all hell will break loose 2015, FEMA and DHS. And this is by John P&D. But let's just dive right into this thing. Something big is about to happen. So many say that they can feel it in their bones. Now, I will be the first one to admit that I feel it in my bones as well, and many viewers out there have stated a similar thing. Could it be in 2015? I don't know. I'm not trying to prophesy or predict anything. What I want to do as a news reporter is just say, hey, I know something's coming soon in the future at some time, and I'm going to give you all the evidence and let you decide. But with that in mind, let's go ahead and enter into this post. But FEMA and DHS. All right. A migration to underground hideouts began 2 years ago in earnest for members of the Alphabet Soup Agency retirees. I knew one of these refugees personally, and he pointed to 2015 as the time when he anticipated that all hell was going to break loose. I wrote an article about the defection of my FEMA contact, his family, and like-minded individuals from FEMA and DHS almost 2 years ago. Pastor Lindsay William recently sent me an email regarding a survival tip for the difficult times ahead. Pastor Williams has been a guest on my show several times, and I sent him back an email asking when he would like to come back on my show. He responded that he has stopped doing interviews. His message indicated it is almost time to stop talking and to start preparing for some very dark days. How do I know? Some of my very best contacts have told me that it is time to stop warning the people because it is now time to start hiding from the wrong people. My initial reaction is to not believe them, but there are too many well-placed sources to not take seriously. So let's just pause right there. First of all, obviously, we know he's stating, hey, it's time to stop talking about it and start taking actions to prepare for these things that are coming up. And I know personally, I have inside people as well who are warning that these things are in our near future. So we just need to have a heads up and start taking everything seriously. This is the warning they are giving us on Patriot News Daily. But it goes on. Jim Marrs saw the warning on the wall 5 years ago. In a December 9th, 2012 interview on the Common Sense Show, Jim Marrs discussed how approximately 400 to 500 top-level bankers have left their position and have gone into seclusion. Now, let me just stop right there before I move on. This is 100% fact. I did a post just this week about bankers that have either committed suicide or bankers that have left their positions, gone into hiding and things like that. If you want to check that out, you can go to my YouTube channel, but let's go on. Marrs reminded my listening audience of how the elite have developed seed vaults, which only they have access to. Marrs was clearly alluding to the fact that some very bad events are coming, and the global elite are aware of it and are moving to meet the threat. I have firsthand knowledge of 4 ex-Fed officers and their families who have relocated to safety enclaves when doing so was very disruptive to their respective family lives. Increasingly, it is looking like some major events is and are coming, and persons with inside information are attempting to remove themselves from harm's way. Jim Marrs will be a guest for 3 hours, and he gives on December 7th, 2014, to discuss this and other issues. Pause right there. I highly encourage you guys to check that out. They've got some good information. But going on, another media friend of mine, Paul Martin of Revolutionary Radio, has been repeatedly telling me that several key contacts of his from various alphabet soup agencies, as well as other military, have or are leaving the country in anticipation of what is coming. In the past 2 weeks, I have had a number of phone calls from media people who are telling me that their sources are repeating the same mantra, or they are just dropping off the radar. Get ready for 2015. Now, like I also stated in an earlier post, there has been an increase in emergency alert tests across the nation, either doing media blackout tests or alert system tests on the television. We had, I don't remember the channel, but there was a channel that had an emergency alert. Here, let me take you to that. Here we are. And I'll leave a link for this as well, but this was an emergency alert notification that flashed across people's screens. And this was back October 24th, 2014, so just a couple months ago, not that long. But it said, this is an emergency action notification. All broadcast stations and cable systems shall transmit, this emergency notification message. The station has been interrupted by its regular programming at the request of the White House to participate in the emergency alert system. It goes on to say, I just forwarded it a little bit, during this emergency, most stations will remain on air, providing news and information to the public in assigned areas. This is AGSTGAO2. We will continue to serve the UVerse area. If you are not in the local area, you should tune to stations providing news and information for your local area. You are listening to the emergency alert system serving the UVerse area. Do not use your telephone. The telephone lines could be kept open for emergency use. We interrupt our programming at the request of the White House. Anyhow, that is kind of the gist of it right there. So going back, now that's not the only emergency alert test that we've had. We had, like I said, the one that I got a phone call for. And this I showed on my YouTube video, probably 1 or 2 YouTubes back. But basically, I had an emergency communication red alert test, and it was done in my entire town, not just here, but our entire town. And these tests are apparently being conducted all across America in different counties and whatnot. And obviously, they've been performed all throughout time, but there does seem to be an uptick in these particular emergency communications, because I've owned my own house for, I don't know how long, but around on or below 15 years-ish, I've owned my own home, and I've never had this happen, and just recently this has happened to me. So we have all these emergency alerts being broadcast by TV, on television, on internet, where they're doing media blackout. I did show you guys in a post earlier that they went on a rampage and blacked out media for a couple of hours. These are tests that they're doing to prepare for something in advance. Now let's go on. We are in the calm before the storm period. And it states, the late summer and early fall were abuzz with the latest rumors about Ebola. Many of us in the independent media spent countless hours debunking the misinformation putting out by the CDC, e.g. the existence of a previous vaccine, the fact that it is airborne, etc. And just as soon as the Ebola stories peaked in October, somebody in the MSM flipped a switch and virtually all meaningful reports disappeared from the news. Why? Good question. The reason for Ebola's disappearance from the media is simple. It was Christmas shopping time. Makes a lot of sense. America has become a service economy. Most of the retail shopping for the year happens between Halloween and the end of the year. The financial success tied to the Christmas shopping is based upon the fact that people must trust that it is safe to go out into the public. If the public perceived that Ebola could be contracted by going out in public, the Christmas shopping season could be stopped in its tracks, and globalist corporations would not be able to maximize profits. However, this is all about to change. So let's just pause for a moment. I have to say that I agree with him 100%. One of the reasons that we felt this pause in the Ebola information is because they wanted us not to be afraid and to get out there and shop, which is exactly what America did. And we went about our Black Fridays as normal, so to speak. He goes on, what was the Ebola scare all about? Many mistakenly believe that the Ebola scare has been mitigated and nothing could be further from the truth. Isn't it interesting that we never saw a toxicology report about the so-called victims of Ebola? When some of these victims somehow recovered against all odds, these people were kept away from the media. Why? Many of us have privately concluded that we in the US are not dealing with traditional Ebola. What we are dealing with in the US has something designed to give the impression that we are on the verge of an Ebola pandemic in the US. Why would the CDC go through such an elaborate charade? The answer is quite simple. The appearance the U.S. was on the verge of the Ebola pandemic gave rise to the governmental preparations that would not raise an eyebrow from an unaware public. And what preparations am I talking about? I am talking about martial law preparations, which could easily be morphed from a form of medical martial law to politically motivated martial law related to not only a pandemic, but to an economic collapse. And believe me, if Ebola or some other dangerous pathogen makes its way into mainstream America, the economy will collapse because people will not be eating out, shopping, attending sports events and concerts, and the service economy as we know it will crumble in a matter of days. Let's pause right there. I agree. Um, I don't necessarily know if Ebola is what it is that's going to crumble our economy. I guess time is going to be the ultimate factor, but I guess it's there. And in a moment, I'm also going to give you a shocking statement from the French foreign minister about a bold statement he said about something that could be hitting us sometime in September. So make sure you're hanging out for that because there's just a lot of things that are coming at us, and I want to make you aware of all of it. And like I said, Ebola is definitely one of those on the forefront, and they are planning with martial law. This is 100% fact. Now, if you aren't aware of the Arms Trade Treaty, let me take you there. All right, so here I am on United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, and yes, this is a legit organization. Sadly, it's part of the UN, as you can see here. But they have an arms treaty that is will enter into force on December 24th, 2014. Merry flippin' Christmas, everyone. You know something is bad when they sign it on a holiday or they enter it into force on a holiday. This throws up a lot of red flags for me. All right, so let's check this thing out. Here's the actual document. I will leave links as I always do, but basically here are some of the objectives and purposes, but it's to establish the highest possible common international standards for regulating or improving the regulation of an international trade in conventional arms. Basically, they want a world treaty of sorts that has to deal with the trading of arms. So there will be limitations on arms internationally. It's not a full-fledged gun grab, so to speak, but it is putting certain limitations on the trading of arms and whatnot. It is not good. If you get a chance, I would highly recommend you reading over it. But here's further stuff that it says: to prevent and eradicate the illicit trade in conventional arms and prevent their diversion. The purpose of contributing to international and regional peace, security, and stability, reduce human suffering. See, they always use it as a cause to protect humanity when we all know that guns protect us. They don't keep us from suffering like they are trying to promote. I'm a big pro Second Amendment gal. But it goes on: promoting cooperation, transparency, and responsible action by states parties in the international trade in conventional arms, thereby building confidence among state parties. But it goes on to say what exactly this includes, is, as you can see, it also includes your small arms and light weapons. But that kind of gives you an idea of what this thing is on. But this is not good news for us. This tells me that their goal, obviously, especially considering they have a division of the United Nations 100% devoted to disarmament of the world, so to speak, and specifically they want to do that here in America. But this tells me that one of their goals is to de-arm us so they can have ultimate control. Because how do you control the people? You take away their weapons. You have a Stalin-style, Hitler-style Mao style rule. Disarm the people and the government basically will take over. So this is not something that you ever want to support, but this is a big issue coming up December 22nd. If you have not heard of that, now you have that information. Going back. All right, so here we are back at the Patriot News Daily, and he goes on, martial law preparations arising out of Ebola scare. I just showed you that they do plan on having that arms trade treaty come across real soon. And like I said, it's going to put some limitations on our guns, and be aware stuff is coming down. By this point in the article, some are saying that, okay, Dave, name some sources, something concrete that we can wrap our minds around. And I just showed you something concrete. And these people are correct in demanding as much concrete information as possible. I agree. There is a point in the article where logic and common sense outweigh doubt and cognitive dissonance. Judge a man by his actions, not by his word. Forget everything you think you know and learn about Ebola scare of this past summer and fall. Simply consider the actions and implications of the following event. Now, I'm going to show you another document in a moment. But here he says, the U.S. has detailed procedures to deal with a pandemic outbreak, and it carries the force of law. Under Section 361 of the Public Health Act, 42 U.S. Code and 264, the U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services is authorized to take measures to prevent the entry and spread of communicable disease from foreign countries in the U.S. and between states. The authority for carrying out these functions on a daily basis has been delegated to the Centers for the CDC control. The CDC utilizes two basic strategies when trying to contain a public outbreak of something as deadly as Ebola, and they are these two things: isolation and quarantine. All right, here we are at the actual code, 42 U.S. Code 264, regulations to control communicable diseases. If you want to pause and read this, you can, but it verifies all of what he just spoke about. I'm not going to get into it, but I'll leave you a link. Back to the post. So he goes on, Paul Watson opened a lot of eyes with the following statement. The source, an office clerk within the LADHS, said that during a policy meeting on the morning of June 18th of last month, his supervisor announced that the LA County Department of Health Services has struck a deal with the government to open up low-cost housing facilities for homeless people, otherwise known as FEMA camps. The source said that his superior ordered staff not to use the term FEMA camps. One look at who is behind this program should raise eyebrows of every person, as it is being ministered by the Department of Health Services. And here is the quote. In an effort to respond to the high need for recuperative care services, Housing for Health will open a 38-bed recuperative care site in South LA this summer. The goal of recuperative care is to provide short-term housing with health oversight of homeless DHS patients who are recovering from acute illnesses or injury or of conditions that would be exacerbated by living on the street or in shelters. The site was renovated to serve patients with mobility impairments and provides wheelchair accessible communities, space indoors, and in an open air courtyard. The site will be operated by Lamp Community, a nonprofit agency with over 25 years of experience providing services to homeless individuals. Now, while this sounds absolutely fascinating and good, there is more to the story. Because remember, they are hiding it. It is bringing these homeless people to FEMA camps. And we don't know exactly what is going on there, but we know that they are bringing them to FEMA camps, and they are told not to call them FEMA camps, even though that is what they are. And he goes on, can't talk about FEMA camps. Where there is smoke, there is fire. A memo from Health and Human Services, as administered by the CDC, speaks about setting up isolation facilities. Todd Stearns, Fox News contributor and talk show host, has interviewed unidentified sources, including doctors, nurses, and counselors, who say that while working with the new illegal immigrants at the Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas, and he found that these civilian employees are being threatened by the East Germany Stasi contingent of the Department of Health Security with prison if they report how bad the health conditions are and how much at risk American public is being placed under. Keep that in mind. We are taking people to these places, but they are told they're not allowed to talk about it with the threat of imprisonment. Now, here's an excerpt from his report from Stearns' Fox News. We have so many kids coming in that there was no way to control all of the sickness. All this stuff coming into our country, she said. We were very concerned at one point about strep throat going around the base. Both the counselor and the nurse said the superiors tried to cover up the extent of the illness. When they found out the kids had scabies, the charge nurse was adamant. Don't mention that. Don't say scabies, the nurse recounted. But everybody knew they had scabies. Some of the workers were very concerned about touching things and picking things up. They asked if they should be concerned, but they were told not to worry about it. Kind of like we're told with Ebola and other things that come out and about. Now, sorry about that. The Stearns report issued an ominous warning, and he said, my sources say America should be very concerned about the secrecy of the government camps. This is a huge warning. People constantly say that these things are not real, yet this is exactly where they are sending our homeless, where they are sending some of the immigrants, and some of the immigrants they're allowing loose into the country all over, so not all of them are being sent there, but some are. And we have sources for these things, and yet people still try to deny them. It doesn't make sense to me. But this is what it is. Now, at about the same time, InfoWars reported the same kind of observations in Houston, Texas, and later in Phoenix. Since May of 2014, the country has been besieged with reports, pictures, and videos of UN vehicles in our country. Fox 5 San Diego ran sightings of these vehicles have been widely reported beginning last spring, and this had led to some suspect that an occupation force is being mobilized. Let me pause right there. I also did a YouTube video on this not that long ago about the UN building up its army. They've got Russian soldiers, American soldiers, soldiers from Israel, soldiers from Saudi Arabia, soldiers from China, soldiers from India, soldiers from France, Italy, all across the country. The UN has a world army, so to speak. And anything with a world army throws up, again, red flags for me. This is the formation of your new world order. And things are going to go down and soon. And to know that they're building up and they've got stations, this is something we need to watch out for, because this isn't global world peace leadership kind of stuff. This is a takeover of our sovereignty and our rights. A report on Sunday morning, July 6th, in the early morning hours, which detailed sightings of UN vehicles being transported north of San Diego on I-15, headed towards Riverside. The story said that the vehicles were manufactured in the U.S. and were being transported for shipment overseas. Really? Does this explain why these vehicles are being transported in several southern states? Does the manufacturer have an automotive plant in Georgia, California, Texas, and etc.? Why didn't you see these reports in Detroit? The Fox 5 website contains neither a video or a written report of the story. I suspect the story was a trial balloon used to gauge the believability and response to the story without leaving behind much in the way of evidence. I agree. In every case, the vehicles are being transported and not being individually driven. This clearly suggests the pre-positioning of military assets for future use. The UN is preparing to seize American guns and have hired personnel to do so. And like I just showed you, the UN arms treaty and the disarmament, this is exactly what they are preparing to do. Now, the arms treaty could lead to something like that. I don't know if it could or couldn't, but it's obviously in the works, and they are doing it, and I did prove that to you. Let's go on. In October 2014, I discovered evidence of Human Health Service medical quarantine camps. Here's a picture of one. However, none of these camps held any medical personnel, medical organizations, or any evidence of treatment facilities. During the Ebola crisis, we learned that in the event of a pandemic, the Secretary of Human Services would assume operation control of the federal emergency public health and medical response. In the event of a pandemic outbreak, the HHS will order the quarantining of Ebola sufferers or any other pandemic, so to speak, and the transport of the same to detainment camps. The mass transportation of Ebola victims to quarantine camps is referred to as ambulance services, and it is a euphemism for transporting sick people to a death camp. Now, he has found evidence supporting these claims in a federal document called Emergency Support Function 8. Let me show that to you. All right, here we are on FEMA.gov. I will leave a link to this, but Emergency Support Function 8, Public Health and Medical Service Annex. And it has all the information in here. I highly recommend you guys go through this on your own. I don't want to keep you for too much time, but there's lots of information on this. And here's some of what he said. ESF 8 support agencies are responsible for maintaining administrative control over their respective response resources after receiving coordinating instructions from HHS. Now, here's a little further. It says that patient evacuation, ESF number 8, is responsible for transporting serious ill or seriously ill describes persons whose illness or injuries is of such severity that there is cause for concern, but there is not imminent danger to life, or injured patients and medical need populations from casualty collection points in the impacted area to designated reception facilities. In other words, to your FEMA camps. It goes on, ESF 8 may request the DoD, the VA, or the DHS, or FEMA via the National Ambulance Contract to provide support for evacuating seriously ill or injured patients. Support may include providing transportation assets, operating and staffing NDMS, federal coordination centers, and processing and tracking patient movements from collection points to their final destination receptive facilities, or again, your FEMA camps. Now, I'm all for if a virus breaks out, quarantining or, rounding up folks. I get it. Because obviously we don't want, others to catch it and for it to spread like wildfire. I get it. But the thing is, I'm trying to prove that these FEMA camps do exist. They are there and they are around, and they can use them for any reason. We have executive orders that name that they can use them for any reason under the sun. If they want to use them as a quarantine because of an outbreak, they can do that. If they want to use them because they want to round up patriot dissidents, so to speak, then they can do that. If they want to round up Christians or Catholics or whoever it is that they want to target, they are going to do that, or veterans in this case, whoever they want to do. Now, my question here is too, I don't see a particular medical personnel in this list, but I do see, as you can tell, that I think they have the Red Cross on staff, and they have people that they can seek or ask for medical help from, but according to this, they don't have any medical staff at those particular FEMA camps in general, and I'm going to get into that in a moment, but they can ask for additional help from certain, companies or organizations within the government. Anyhow, that said, let me go back. I do believe that what I also want to say is, in the event of an outbreak of say Ebola, for example, or any other pandemic, in the event that happens, I want a warning that something is going to happen, and I don't think we will necessarily get that from our government either. So just another thing to think about. Now, here's what's tricky. As you know, as you can see, those who are doing the transporting to these NDMS hospitals, so to speak, they're not really any hospital people helping with these. Now, they can enlist help, so to speak, but these things aren't really there. Let me show you who is there. Let's scroll down. And it's this: supporting agencies, Department of Agriculture. What they have to do with that is way beyond anything I can think of. Department of Agriculture, Department of Commerce, Department of Defense, that'd be your rounding up, Department of Energy, National Nuclear Security Administration, Department of Homeland Security, that's just a continuation, Department of the Interior, Department of Justice, Department of Labor. Where is your medical staff? Just, Department of Transportation, Department of Veteran Affairs. Well, there are some, we have maybe some medical aids in your Veteran Affairs, possibly. coordinates with participating NDMS hospitals to provide incident-related medical care. Okay, and we know the kind of medical care they give there. Emergency Protection Agency, and then we have General Service Administration, U.S. Agency for International Development, U.S. Postal Service, oh, and the American Red Cross, which is just your overall basic first aid, a little beyond that, or emergency stuff, so to speak. But I don't see no CDC anywhere listed on this, so to speak. But as part of the members or part of the functions now, they can enlist help from them, but they're not part of the immediate list. And if they are these quarantine centers, you would think that they would have them top of the list, but it just isn't there. And he goes to explain that in here as well. He says, according to the document, the DoD is the only recognized federal partner responsible for regulating and tracking patients transported on DoD asserts to appropriate treatment facilities or these hospitals. However, however, other agencies may assist with isolation and quarantine measures with point of distribution operations. And here is where he lists the participants, which I just showed you, all the way to the Red Cross. No healthcare personnel at the HHS FEMA detention camps. He says in the above list, which I just showed you on the document itself, of Ebola detention centers or any pandemic, I don't see the CDC or the National Institute of Health listed, nor do I see any legitimate medical organizations other than like the Red Cross, which does your basic stuff, or the VA. I don't even see the presence of any volunteer medical organizations such as Doctors Without Borders. Does anyone else find it disturbing that the transport of very sick people will be conducted and the end point is devoid of any medical treatment organization and or facilities? It's interesting to know that. Now, like I said, I did find that they can enlist the help, so to speak, but it's not fully on there. There is not one shred of evidence that these camps are intended to treat or even make comfortable people who will contact Ebola or be exposed to Ebola or any other disease. The most disturbing thing is that these camps will be death camps for relatively healthy people. If you are a person who is unlucky enough to be discovered to have asthma, maybe you just aren't with Ebola or whatever, or merely be temporarily suffering from congestion in one of the lungs from allergy or a simple cold, you might find yourself in one of these ambulance services or buses or planes to a quarantine camp to your final destination. And he goes on to list Executive Order 13592. And he says any medical detention camp that does not have medical organizations is a concentration camp by any other name. The pre-positioning of these asserts for use in 2015 was the intention of the Ebola scare. Now, we could see a lot of things coming in 2015. I'm not sure what the new year will hold, only time will tell. But we have a calm coming before a storm possible. We know FEMA camps exist. We know quarantines are real. We know Ebola can break out as a pandemic. We know the economy could collapse. We know also that they're setting up an arms trade treaty and there could be issues with that. But one more breaking bit of information that I want to show you is from the French foreign minister. Let me show you that clip, who made a shocking statement that will blow you away. And I want to close with this because I think it's imperative. Now, I'm going to leave a YouTube to this, but it's French foreign minister. He says this: 500 days is what they have in order to avoid climate chaos. Now, I don't exactly understand why he said that or what he meant by that, but let me play the clip for you. Now, he said this May 13th, 2014. Let me just play it real quick.
We have 500 days to avoid the climate chaos. Very important issue of climate change, climate chaos. And we have, I said that we had 500 days to avoid climate chaos. And I know that President Obama and John Kerry himself are committed on this subject, and I'm sure that them, with a lot of other friends, we should be able to reach a success in this very important matter.
All right, so there you have it. If you haven't heard this before, you need to hear it. But basically, if you weren't able to understand him, he says we have 500 days to avoid climate chaos. He did not expand on this, but he was with John Kerry when he made the statement. Now, what on earth does that mean? I have no idea. I know people have talked about, maybe it's an asteroid. I don't know. I'm not saying that I agree with that either. It's just one of the theories out there. I don't know what he means. Now, I do know that but I do know that from May 13th, 2014, when he made that shocking, strange statement, that 500 days from that would put us in September of 2015. Now, some things to think about is we all know that the fourth blood moon is coming September 28th in 2015. Not saying anything will happen. I am just pointing out what I know. We also know that the Day of Atonement, the Israeli holiday, also takes place September, right at that same time that he's saying 500 days. So we have a blood moon in September, we have the Day of Atonement in September, and also our Jubilee year is that year. And all these things are just crazy if we add that together. So I'm just kind of asking the question, what the heck is he talking about? I don't know. But September is definitely a month I'm just going to be keeping an eye on to know that we've got our blood moon, we've got our Day of Atonement, we've got our Jubilee year, and then we have the French foreign minister saying that right around that time, we need to avoid climate chaos, whatever that means. Anyhow, I wanted to give you guys all the facts and just kind of inform you about everything that is going on, and you guys can do with the information what you will. Anyhow, this is Lisa Haven signing off.